What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode. This is episode 7 of the Randall Handles Football Podcast. Today, I will be taking a deep dive into the NFC East with the Philadelphia Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Football Giants, and the Washington Redskins. These 4 teams do compose the NFC East, and just as a preview, this is considered one of the weaker divisions in all of the NFL. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to please subscribe to your channel. Get these updates, get these notifications when it is that these videos do get released and they do drop, and show some support, okay? So without further ado, let's get started. Last season, the Philadelphia Eagles were the division winners. They faced the Seattle Seahawks in the opening round of the playoffs and ultimately lost that game to the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks then went on to play the Green Bay Packers the following week. So I think that the Philadelphia Eagles have a very solid core as a team already. They're pretty set on the offensive side. Of course, they have Carson Wentz as their quarterback. They're going to run it back with running back Miles Sanders, receivers Alshon Jeffrey, tight end Zach Ertz. So I think that they're pretty solid on the offensive side already. And of course, we know on the defensive side, they have a dominant defensive front led by Fletcher Cox in the middle. And so really what the Eagles tried to do this offseason was to bolster their secondary. They did so by acquiring cornerback Darius Slay from the Detroit Lions via a trade prior to the NFL draft. Darius Slay is a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. And so I think that if their ultimate goal was to improve their secondary, they definitely did this. They definitely achieved this by acquiring Darius Slay. So some of the losses that the Eagles had were running back Jordan Howard. By the end of the season, Howard wasn't even thought of in Philadelphia. Like I said, they had running back Miles Sanders, who was pretty much toting the rock for the entire last half of the season. Out the door is wide receiver Nelson Agholor. Now, Aguilar is an interesting player. I think he has a lot of upside. He's a very talented wide receiver. He works a lot from the slot. He is gone. He is now with the Las Vegas Raiders. The thing that plagued Nelson Agholor all throughout his career in Philadelphia thus far was inconsistency catching the ball. Now, you might think, oh, he's a wide receiver. He should be catching the ball all the time. Well, that's exactly how it is that Philadelphia Eagles fans feel. He had a lot of just no-brainer drops that really are completely unnecessary. There's no explanation for it. So that ultimately is what he's going to be remembered for the most for his tenure in Philadelphia. Like I said, I do think he's a talented wide receiver, and it's a shame that they're going to let him go. But they did bring in a bunch of wide receivers to try and take his place. They wanted to get a lot faster on the outside. Of course, they brought in Marquise Goodwin from the 49ers. They drafted Jalen Reagor in the NFL draft. Jalen Reagor is a wide receiver from TCU. So I think they're going to have enough weapons at Carson Wentz's disposal to replace Agholor and ultimately help out this receiving corps. And then, of course, their last key subtraction comes in the form of their secondary and safety, Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm Jenkins went back to his former team, the New Orleans Saints. So I've already told you guys that in came Darius Slay and Jalen Reagor and Marquise Goodwin in the offseason. They also did pick up a very valuable defensive tackle alongside Fletcher Cox in the middle. And Javon Hargrave. Javon Hargrave was a interior lineman from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, he just goes to the other side of the state a little bit, doesn't travel too far. So he is now with the Eagles as well, okay? So all in all, I think this is an Eagles team that is plenty talented. I think the biggest question marks with this team, as always, is the health. Can Carson Wentz really stay healthy and play an entire season? I don't think he's done that since his rookie year. Their wide receivers, they were depleted in wide receivers by the end of last season, heading into playoffs. So can Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, and everyone else stay healthy on the offensive side? I think if that does happen, the Eagles are a playoff team, probably a wild card team, or at least going to be in the hunt for a wild card. I think that this division this coming year belongs to the Dallas Cowboys, and it's the Dallas Cowboys' division crown to lose. Okay, And you might say, oh, well, the same thing was said last year about the Dallas Cowboys. And that is true, right? The Cowboys were the favorite to win the division. They're a very talented team in themselves. But just ultimately, the Cowboys have a tendency just to shoot themselves in the foot and to hurt themselves when they really shouldn't be hurting. Okay, so with that, let's take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles schedule. Week 1, they open up the season in Washington, taking on their division foe, the Redskins. Now, it remains to be seen who the starting quarterback is going to be in Washington between Dwayne Haskins or Kyle Allen. Of course, Kyle Allen played for the Carolina Panthers last season, and Ron Rivera was the head coach of the Carolina Panthers last season. So he may play a little bit of favoritism and ultimately go with Kyle Allen. I think that would be a real shame. I mean, Dwayne Haskins is only entering his second year in the NFL. So I think you ride the young kid. I think you start Dwayne Haskins, but it remains to be seen who will be the Week 1 starter in Washington. Week 2, and of course, I do have them beating the Washington Redskins as well. Washington Redskins are going to have a very, very tough year, in my opinion. Week 2, the Eagles host Jared Goff and the Los Angeles Rams. Now, this is going to be an interesting game. Of course, Jared Goff for the Rams, Carson Wentz for the Eagles. They were the number 1 and number 2 picks in their same NFL draft, in their respective draft. Of course, Goff went number 1, Wentz went number 2. And well, I think both of these quarterbacks have had success in the NFL. During that time, the Philadelphia Eagles have won a Super Bowl. The Los Angeles Rams have made it to a Super Bowl. However, the downside is the Rams did not win the Super Bowl, and Carson Wentz was not even the starting quarterback in the Super Bowl when they won and beat the New England Patriots. So, I think it'll be an interesting matchup against number 1, number 2 picks in their respective drafts. So it'll be a good game. I have the Eagles beating the Rams and starting out the season with 2 wins and 0 losses. In Week 3, I have the Eagles getting their first loss of the season when they host the Cincinnati Bengals. So that drops them to a record of 2 wins and 1 loss. Week 4, I think they get a big victory against the San Francisco 49ers in Santa Clara. This is on Sunday Night Football, and I have the Eagles beating the 49ers to improve to a record of 3 wins and 1 loss. If they really, truly do beat my San Francisco 49ers, it's going to be a big statement win that, hey, this Eagles team is for real, but not to be taken lightly. They can compete with all of the juggernauts of the NFC. Okay. Week 5, the Eagles travel to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. Travel, right? I mean, they're both in Pennsylvania, so it's not really much of a travel game. But the Eagles do go to Heinz Field to take on the Steelers. I have them losing this game and dropping to a record of 3 wins and 2 losses. In Week 6, the Eagles get their second statement win of the season. In Week 6, they host the Baltimore Ravens, the reigning NFL MVP Lamar Jackson, the team that set the record for the most rushing yards in a single season. I have the Eagles beating the Baltimore Ravens in Philadelphia in Week 6 to improve to a record of 4 wins and 2 losses. The following week, they host the New York Giants on Thursday Night Football, and they come away with a victory as well here, improving to a record of 5 wins and 2 losses. So at this point, almost halfway through the season, if you're an Eagles fan, you're loving life. Okay, this is a terrific start. You played a bunch of tough games, and you've come away on top. You're feeling really good about this season that you guys will have a chance to make a deep playoff run. The following week, in Week 8, the Eagles host the Dallas Cowboys. I have them losing this game to the Cowboys. Like I said, the Eagles get some statement wins against the 49ers, against the Ravens, but ultimately against their division foe, against the Dallas Cowboys, I have them losing. I think the Cowboys are just a superior team to where the Philadelphia Eagles are. The following week, in Week 9, is the Eagles' bye week, so they get a week off after the loss. The following week, in Week 10, they travel to New York to take on the Giants. I have them winning this game in Week 10 against the Giants, improving to a record of 6 wins and 3 losses. So again, you're right where you want to be. You're going to be in the thick of the playoff hunt coming down the stretch. The following week, they travel to Cleveland to take on the Browns, and I have them dropping this game. And this drops them to a record of 6 wins and 4 losses. The following week, they host the Seattle Seahawks on Monday Night Football, and they get yet another statement win. Okay, I have them beating the Seahawks on Monday Night Football in Philadelphia, improving to a record of 7 wins and 4 losses. So at this point, if we look back at their schedule, They've beaten the Seahawks. They've beaten the 49ers. They've beaten the Ravens. This is a great start. This is exactly where you want to be if you are a Eagles fan. The following 2 weeks, I have them dropping both of these games. After the Monday night game against the Seahawks, they travel to Lambeau Field to take on Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. I have them losing this game. This will be in November. It's probably going to be pretty chilly. I think this just favors the Green Bay Packers a little bit more than it favors the Philadelphia Eagles. And in the following week, in week 14, they host the New Orleans Saints. And again, I have them dropping this game as well. So at this point, they now have a record of 7 wins and 6 losses. So after the start of 7-4, dropping these next 2 games is really going to hurt them. However, I have them finishing off the season strong and winning 2 of their last 3 games. In week 15, they travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals, where they come away with a victory. In week 16, they travel to Dallas. They take on the Cowboys, and they drop this game. So I have them getting swept, getting the season series swept against the Cowboys. And then ultimately in week 17, they host the Washington Redskins again, another division game, and I have them coming away with a victory. So all in all, I have the Philadelphia Eagles finishing with a record of 9 wins and 7 losses, yet again for like the 3rd or 4th straight year. That just seems to be where they're at. That's not bad. That's not great. You know, they're somewhere in the middle. Like I said, I think they're going to be fighting. They're going to be a viable wild card team. But I think honestly, this division just belongs to the Dallas Cowboys this year. So that brings us to the Dallas Cowboys. In my opinion, I think the Dallas Cowboys offseason was about trying to retain as much of this talent as possible. They had a bunch of their core players who came up as free agents this offseason. Number one, starting with their quarterback, Dak Prescott. Now, Dak Prescott put up career numbers last season. They wanted to get a deal done with Prescott last season. That didn't happen. Come this offseason, they want to get a deal done. They still have not gotten a deal done with him, and he's playing under the franchise tag. Okay. I think that, you know, he wants to be the highest paid quarterback, and I don't think that's unreasonable. And especially last season, he showed that he can carry a team when Ezekiel Elliott had a quote unquote down year for them last season. But I still just have not seen the postseason success from Prescott to warrant him being the highest paid quarterback in the league. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a terrific quarterback. I think, I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I wouldn't put him in the top 3 by any stretch. So I think if he just shows a little bit more this season, then the Cowboys are going to have their hands tied behind their back, and they're going to have to sign a check and give him whatever it is that he is asking for. He deserves it, right? So they have Prescott at quarterback. They're running it back again with him. Of course, like I said, they have Ezekiel Elliott at running back, terrific running back. I think he is the top 1 or 2 running backs in the entire NFL. He did get his contract last season, so he's set. Amari Cooper, their stud wide receiver that they brought over from the Raiders back when they were in Oakland 2 seasons ago. They had to lock him up. They signed him. He's making about $20 million per year. Tight end Jason Witten. So if you remember 2 seasons ago, Jason Witten retired, and he went to go work in the broadcast booth. I believe it was on Monday Night Football. He did that for just 1 year before coming back to the Dallas Cowboys to play a season. But then this offseason, he couldn't get a deal done with the Cowboys. And so he hit free agency and ultimately signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. So Witten is no longer a member of the Dallas Cowboys. He is now with the Las Vegas Raiders. That brings us to their stud cornerback, Byron Jones. Now, Byron Jones was their next key free agent that they really had to re-sign, or that they really wanted to re-sign, another piece of their young core. However, the asking price was just a little bit too much for the Cowboys, and they had other pressing needs that they needed to take care of and keep their offensive core together. So Byron Jones is now gone from Dallas. He signed a mega deal with the Miami Dolphins. It became the highest paid cornerback in the entire NFL. We'll talk about that in another episode, but now the Miami Dolphins have the 2 highest paid cornerbacks in the entire league, Byron Jones and Xavier Howard, the 2 highest paid. So the Miami Dolphins are paying an extraordinary amount to have their secondary be what it is. So we'll see if that works out for them. And of course, their pass rusher, the player that led their team in sacks last season, Robert Quinn, is no longer with the Cowboys. He signed a deal with the Chicago Bears, so he's no longer with the Cowboys. Of course, the Cowboys do still have DeMarcus Lawrence, who had his one terrific season where he led the league in sacks, and so signed his deal. So if you're a Cowboys fan, you definitely want to see more production out of DeMarcus Lawrence this season. We'll see if that ultimately happens. So now, in terms of people that the Cowboys brought in, obviously they couldn't do too much. They were pretty tied with their salary cap. However, they did have enough space to sign former Pro Bowl and All-Pro defensive tackle Gerald McCoy. Gerald McCoy was a longtime Tampa Bay Buccaneer. He signed with the Carolina Panthers last season, so now he is with the Cowboys. I think he's a terrific pickup. I think he's a dominant defensive lineman. Obviously, his best days are a little bit past him, but I think he can still be a disruptive force in the interior. So they did pick up Gerald McCoy. They signed insurance in the form of Andy Dalton as a quarterback to back up Dak Prescott. Let me say this: Andy Dalton is a starting quarterback in the NFL. He has starting quarterback material. He got the short end of the stick in Cincinnati these last few seasons, but I think he does still have starting quarterback material. So he's going to spend the next season backing up Dak Prescott and, just reevaluating his choices and seeing where he goes from here. And then, of course, the Dallas Cowboys were absolutely handed a gift in the NFL draft when wide receiver CD Lamb out of Oklahoma dropped to the Dallas Cowboys. They picked him up, added another terrific wide receiver to Dak Prescott's arsenal. And hey, I think the number one ranked offense last season is on pace to be the number one ranked offense again this season. Okay. So again, if you're a Cowboys fan, what's not to like? Like I said, you got Prescott, Elliott, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and now CD Lamb all on the offense. This team should put up points, no problem. So like I said, they are my pick to win the division. I think they're even good enough to get a first round bye in the playoffs. So let's look at their schedule and see how things shape up. In week 1, the Dallas Cowboys travel to Los Angeles to take on the Rams, and they come away with a victory. This game comes on Sunday Night Football, and I think the Cowboys honestly are going to blow out the Rams. In week 2, the Dallas Cowboys host the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, and Todd Gurley come to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. And I think the Cowboys come away with a victory here as well. In week 3, the Cowboys get their first loss of the season when they travel to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. I think Seattle, with the 12th man, is deafening up there in Seattle. I think the Seahawks just don't lose at home, and they're not going to lose this game to the Dallas Cowboys, okay? So I have the Cowboys dropping their game against the Seahawks in week 3. And then ultimately after this game against the Seahawks, they go on another 3-game winning streak. In week 4, they host the Cleveland Browns. Week 5, they host the New York Giants. And on week 6, they host the Arizona Cardinals on Monday Night Football. All 3 of those games, they come away with a victory. So through 6 weeks, I have the Cowboys at a record of 5 wins and 1 loss. Again, at this point, they're sitting on top of their division. They're their lone division leader. Like I said, the Cowboys are in for a great season, and this is just the start of it. In week 7, they start to look ahead a little bit, and they travel to Washington to take on the Redskins. I have them dropping this game. It's a stunner. It's a bit of a shocker, I know, but I have the Cowboys dropping this game to the Redskins. The following week, in week 8, the Cowboys travel to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles, and I have them coming away with a victory here. So through 8 weeks, I have the Cowboys at a record of 6 wins and 2 losses. This should be good enough to be, if not the leader, at least in the top 2, top 3 in the entire NFC. In week 9, the Dallas Cowboys host the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I have them winning this game as well, improving to a record of 7 wins and 2 losses and heading into their bye week. The following week after the bye week, in week 11, they travel to Minnesota to take on the Vikings, and they get their last loss of the season. They drop this game to the Vikings to fall to a record of 7 wins and 3 losses. And like I said, this is their last loss of the season. The following week, they host the Washington Redskins on Thursday Night Football. The following week, They travel to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. This is on Thanksgiving, another Thursday football game. And I have the Cowboys beating the Ravens here as well. The following week, in week 14, they travel to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. They come away with the victory. In week 15, they get a nice statement win if the Ravens game wasn't already enough. In week 15, they host the San Francisco 49ers, the NFC champions from last season, and they beat the 49ers here as well. In week 16, they host the Eagles. They come away with a victory. And in week 17, they travel to New York to take on the Giants and get a win. So all in all, I have the Dallas Cowboys finishing with a record of 13 wins and 3 losses. This is going to be good enough, obviously, to win their division, but not only to win their division, but to come away with a first-round bye in the playoffs, okay? So expect big things from the Dallas Cowboys this season. Now this brings us to the New York Giants. The New York Giants had a definitely unexciting offseason. Of course, they do have a new head coach. They did bring in Joe Judge, who I think will help this team out a little bit. But in my opinion, they didn't do enough. They really didn't do anything at all to help out their rookie quarterback from last season, Daniel Jones. Of course, Eli Manning did officially retire at the end of last season, so he is out. They didn't do anything to get rid of players. Of course, they re-upped and they franchise tagged defensive end Leonard Floyd, who they traded for in the middle of last offseason. So they did keep Leonard Floyd. They did keep their core together. In addition to that, they signed a few good defensive players in the free agency. Cornerback James Bradbury comes over from Carolina. Linebacker Blake Martinez, interior middle linebacker Blake Martinez from Green Bay. So those two players should help out this New York Giants defense. As well as they did draft Xavier McKinney, the safety out of Alabama. So I think all three of those players should help this defense out a lot. And of course, in the first round with their fourth pick in the NFL draft, they drafted Andrew Thomas, the offensive tackle from Georgia. He's a stud of a lineman. I think to protect Daniel Jones's back blind side. So, all those moves should help out their team overall. I just don't think that they did enough to surround Daniel Jones with enough weapons. Of course, they do still have stud running back Saquon Barkley, but I don't think that's going to be enough to keep this team relevant and to have them have a winning season. So if you're Giants fans, don't expect too big of things from the Giants this season. All you can really hope for is to see progress from your quarterback, Daniel Jones, and that he starts to live up to his first round, I think it was 8th overall draft billing from last season. So looking at the Giants' schedule, in week 1, they host the Pittsburgh Steelers on Monday Night Football, and they start off the season with a big loss. I'm fearful that this is going to be a big blowout loss for the Giants, and I'm fearful that a lot of these games will be big blowout losses for the Giants. In week 2, they travel to Chicago to take on the Bears, and they drop this game as well. Week 3, they host San Francisco 49ers, and they come away with a loss as well. Week 4, they travel to Los Angeles, take on the Rams, drop this game as well. Week 5, they travel to Dallas, take on the Cowboys, they drop this game as well. So starting out the season, I have the Giants at a record of 0 wins and 5 losses before in week 6 picking up their first victory when they host the Washington Redskins in New York. I think the Giants and the Redskins are going to be battling out for which team is going to be the worst in the division. Those are two teams that are going to be battling it out for the number 1 overall pick. I think if you are the Giants and Redskins, neither of these teams, they both should have their franchise quarterback, Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins. But like I said, we don't know what the Redskins are going to do in terms of their quarterback situation. But I don't think either of these teams are even going to consider drafting Trevor Lawrence if they do get the number 1 overall pick. So they'll be able to use that pick on something else and to help out their team in a better way. So week 6, I have the Giants beating the Redskins and getting their first win. Week 7, they travel to Philadelphia on Thursday Night Football to take on the Eagles, and they drop this game. Week 8, they host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football, and they drop this game as well, falling to a record of 1 win and 7 losses. Week 9, they travel to Washington to take on the Redskins once again, and they drop this game as well, falling to a record of 1 win and 10 losses. And this will officially put them in the last place in the NFC East for the time being. The following week, they host the Philadelphia Eagles, and they drop this game as well heading into their bye week. So heading into their bye week, I have them at one win and 9 losses. So heading into their bye week in week 11, 1 win and 10 losses, definitely not where 1 win and 9 losses, not where they want to be, definitely going to be out of the postseason. At this point, you're playing for some pride. Like I said, you're hoping to see some nice things out of Daniel Jones. Coming out of their bye week, again, I have them getting 3 straight losses, traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals, traveling to Seattle to take on the Seahawks, and lastly, number 3, hosting the Arizona Cardinals in the Meadowlands, dropping all 3 of these games out of their bye week. In week 15, I have them getting their final win of the season when they host the Cleveland Browns. They come away with a victory here to finish their season with 2 wins and, of course, 14 losses. In week 16, they travel to Baltimore, and in week 17, they host the Dallas Cowboys. So again, if you're a Giants fan, definitely not where you want to be, but at least they'll be able to add some more pieces to their team, and hopefully whatever weaknesses they show in this season, they'll be able to address them in the following offseason. I just honestly just don't think they made enough moves to make a significant jump from where they were last season. So this brings us to the team that finished in 4th place in the NFC last season, earned the number 2 overall pick, and of course drafted stud defensive end. There's never been a prospect like him coming out of Ohio State, or coming out of anywhere, but there's never been a prospect like him. But he did come out of Ohio State, and that is defensive end Chase Young. There must be something in the water in Ohio State because they've had a lot of these stud outside linebackers / defensive ends to rush a passer. Of course, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, and now Chase Young. So I think Chase Young just follows right in the footsteps of another terrific pass rusher coming out of Ohio State. They did trade away their longtime offensive tackle, Trent Williams. Of course, there was a lot of bad stuff happening around Trent Williams. Of course, starting 2 seasons ago, when he demanded trade, got injured, they didn't handle the injury well, wanted him to play when he wasn't healthy, yada yada yada. So ultimately, finally, the Redskins did trade away Trent Williams to the San Francisco 49ers. I think if you're a Redskins fan, or if you were Washington, this is a move you had to make at some point rather than later. The longer you held them, the less power you guys had. So it was a move you had to make. And of course, if you're a 49ers fan, terrific pickup. He's a stud, all-pro offensive tackle. So like I said, they did bring in Chase Young from the draft. They did sign Kendall Fuller, the cornerback from the Kansas City Chiefs. And they did sign linebacker Thomas Davis from the Chargers. Of course, Thomas Davis spent a long time in Carolina, where Ron Rivera was the head coach. So he comes over from the Los Angeles Chargers to reunite with his head coach, Ron Rivera, in Washington. Other than that, it was a pretty unexciting offseason for the Redskins. Like I said, if the Giants didn't do anything to improve their team, the Redskins really didn't do anything to improve their team. Like I said, I know Chase Young is a generational talent. I know he will be a terrific player, but I don't think he'll do enough by himself to turn this team around, okay? You need to surround Dwayne Haskins or Kyle Allen, right? We don't know who's really going to be the quarterback in Washington, but whoever it is, you have to surround him with talent in order for them to be successful, especially when they are young quarterbacks. So the Redskins really didn't do anything to help him out. And so I think that it's going to be a long season for the Redskins as well. But, however, they will not finish in the cellar in the NFC East. That belongs to the New York Giants. So much like the Giants, I have the Redskins starting out the season with 6 straight losses. In week 1, they host the Philadelphia Eagles. In week 2, they travel to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Week 3, they take on the Browns in Cleveland. Week 4, they host the Baltimore Ravens. Week 5, they host the Los Angeles Rams. And in week 6, they travel to New York to take on the Giants. Out of all of these games, this last one, week 6, would probably be the most winnable. I think it's going to be a close game between the Giants and Redskins, but I do have the Redskins losing this and starting out the season with 0 wins and 6 losses. However, week 7, we get the stunner, the complete shocker, when the Redskins do host the Dallas Cowboys and beat the Dallas Cowboys. So heading into their bye week, they just got a victory against the Cowboys. They're sitting at a record of 1 win and 6 losses going into the bye week. After the bye week, they host the New York Giants and again come away with a victory. So now they're on a little 2-game winning streak. They have a record of 2 wins and 6 losses. It's a feel-good moment for them as they try to right the wrong and try to turn this thing around. After the Giants game, they traveled to Detroit to take on Lions, where they dropped this game. Kind of a rebound. But in the following week, they host the Cincinnati Bengals and come away with a victory to improve their record to 3 wins and 7 losses. Now, 3 wins and 7 losses is not the best. It's definitely not good. But if you're a Redskins fan, at least it's a lot better of a start. So after starting out the season 0-6, you have now won 3 of the last 4 games to improve their record of 3 wins and 7 losses. You know, that's going to be a lot to make you feel good about going into as this season starts to unwind. Heading into week 12, they host the Cincinnati Bengals. Heading into week 13, they travel to Dallas. On Thursday football, this is just a Thursday night football. They travel to Dallas to take on the Cowboys, and they drop this game before the following week. In week 13, they travel to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers, and they come away with a victory. So now at this point, if you're a Redskins fan, you've won 4 out of your last 6 games. You've improved to a record of 4 wins and 8 losses. Again, not exactly where you want to be, but this was a good turnaround after your 0-6 start. But this is where all the fun ends. And I have the Redskins dropping their last 4 games of the season. So in week 14, they travel to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. In week 15, they host the Seattle Seahawks. Week 16, they host the Carolina Panthers. In week 17, they travel to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. All of those games losses to finish out the season with 4 wins and 12 losses, a repeat of the prior season. So just to recap, I have the Cowboys finishing first with a record of 13 wins and 3 losses. The Eagles finishing second and earning or being in the hunt for a wild card spot, finishing with a record of 9 wins and 7 losses. The Redskins finished third with a record of 4 wins and 12 losses. And the Giants finished fourth with 2 wins and 14 losses. So what do you guys think? Leave me some comments below. Let me know what you guys think. And so this ends another episode of the Randall Handles Football Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and have a great day, and I'll see you next time.